Hi there. Welcome to our Brown Belt program. This is the level we call our participants efficient integrators. And by now we've got through a lot of the hopes and dreams, and we've got beyond the hype. And now hopefully you are quietly confident. And now we've chosen the right things to do. So we've looked at being effective. And now we're starting to get into efficiency. So how do we optimize and do things right? So with Efficient Integrator, you are going to be confident now, and you might say something to yourself like, ChatGPT makes my life easier. It's not bragging or boasting. It's just a quiet sort of confidence. And at our insight level, your standard operating procedures are now assets that can be handed off or scaled. One of the things I teach people is if you've got a better way of doing something, you can teach others. You can earn extra money in your business as a consultant to others in your industry. It's a great way to meet new people, great way to add a new revenue stream, and of course, to be seen as an expert. So we love creating standard operating procedures. And then at the very least, we want our entire team using them. And in a perfect world, our team is not only using them, they're now creating their own and optimizing the team ones that we already have. So with the dojo, talking about mastering ChatGPT, we were always looking at constant and never-ending improvement. So we are building those assets, and the more we can streamline them. In the purple belt, we talked about creating SOPs for our critical cash flow path. We want to now start to look at other areas of our business, and really, truly, this is not something we finish and say, there, we're done. I would suggest that, again, if we're more efficient, we're more effective, we're having more impact, we're earning more money, we're working less hours, I encourage my people to have at least one day every quarter, so 1 out of 90 days, focused on the strategy. What are we going to do for the next quarter? And we've talked already about it. We will talk about it some more. In our various belt levels, we practice for the 90 days, we practice what we call the attract, convert, deliver. So we'll have one project for how do we attract clients, one project to optimize how we convert our prospects into clients, and then, of course, the deliver is how do we have white glove service and how do we keep improving it? So truly, whether you do anything external to your business or you keep it all inside, your standard operating procedures are assets that we are going to constantly polish and improve to make less friction in your business, make it more profitable, and quite frankly, more fun to work in. In Clarity, we talk about documentation. And not just documentation for the sake of documentation. Documentation should, after we've eliminated and automated as much as we can, help delegate. So it's not just to keep things organized, but it's also to keep things moving. So a static document, I once worked at a large international firm, and first day I got a 2-inch binder with all of the stuff I was supposed to know to work there. I'm going to be honest, it was so intimidating. I meant to read it, and then at some point it was just used to prop up my monitor. So we want stuff that people actually use. It's not just to say we have it. It's literally a living, breathing document that guides us in all that we do. And by the way, I believe in Pareto principle. So I believe 20% of the systems that we document will give us 80% of the benefits in our business. So again, if we focus on that, identifying the most important critical 20%, then we've got time to decide if we want to do the rest. And for the growth mindset, Here, we're going to free up capacity so that we and our team can move from being purely tactical to having strategic leadership. And this is the difference between being effective and doing the right things versus just focusing on being efficient and doing things right. So, the big mindset leap here, the thing we hear people say the most is, I'm done with saving minutes. Now I want to save entire days, weeks, or months. So, this is where we're starting to push the boundary of what we thought was possible. And so the brown belt is really that moment. We've proven to ourselves this works. Now we're going to start experimenting and going for bigger and bigger wins. And by the way, every win has to be built on the foundation of the wins before it. So we're literally stacking a bunch of small wins to start to build towards bigger wins. So in the brown belt stage, the efficient integrator, it is about moving from personal efficiency to systemic resilience and effectiveness. And the focus shifts from just creating systems in the purple belt to auditing, measuring, and optimizing these systems to ensure they scale and endure over time. And by the way, if you don't believe in systems, you probably haven't made it here yet. But if you still have some doubt, let's talk, because really the foundation of this is we have systems. How do we increase the effectiveness and efficiency of them? And how do we get our team to think in systems rather than just reacting? So the brown belt core objectives, insight, our SOPs are now assets that can be handed off or scaled. Clarity is about documenting as a step towards delegation, not just to organize things. And growth, we're going to free up capacity to move from tactical to strategic leadership. I know we've already talked about this. I repeat it because I think it's really important to understand why we're doing what we're doing. If you understand the context, the how is easier once you know the why. All right, mindset badge. This is the fundamental, and this is, as always, the one where we spend most of our time. And basically what we want to do is build the foundational belief system and awareness that we need. So this is all about belief and awareness. So our core focus is to build SOPs that are assets that can be handed off or scaled. So there is a means of gathering, there's a means of verifying and validating, and of course, there's a means to review and update. So for what it's worth, I am a massive fan of SOPs. My number one resource, and there's several, but my number one resource, I will remind you, is The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. And what I love about the book itself, and by the way, you might think, oh, it's about sales. What does it have to do with me? If you're not in sales, I can see the confusion. I was like that when I first heard about the book. What I realized was the book is about systems in a business. And if you don't know who Chet Holmes is, he was the individual that Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett would bring in when they buy $100 million company and they needed to grow it fast. They would put him in charge. And at one point, he was running 9 multi-billion-dollar companies. As the leader, he was guiding their growth. So to me, he knows his stuff. Now, I've heard people say, well, he's too big for me. I can't learn from that. I would disagree wholeheartedly, because foundational things that work, just work, will work no matter the size of your business, whether you're one person or many. And personally, if you haven't read the book, I encourage you to. My favorite thing in the book is he actually teaches a concept. First of all, the first chapter is about the time habits of billionaires. How they manage their time is very different than how the rest of us do. But the second chapter is about how to run internal workshops to optimize your business. So I actually have my own custom GPT. I've named it ChatGPT. And basically, ChatGPT keeps me in line and helps me implement the practices from the book. So if I haven't convinced you it is a worthwhile read, I'm going to just pitch one more time. Go read it. Trust me, you'll thank me for it later. So if we have the mindset of our SOPs, our assets, we're going to work towards optimizing them and improving them. And I would argue they are, in fact, assets because there's something right now we invest a little bit of time, energy, attention, maybe some money into building them, but they will increase in value over time and give us a greater return as time goes on. So these assets, again, I'm not going to argue where you put them on the balance sheet, but the reality is your business is worth more to a future buyer someday because you have these assets in place. And what that means is, as the current owner, you benefit more. Your employees are going to be happier. They're going to be more reliable, more consistent. Your customers are going to be happier. Everybody wins when you get good quality SOPs. Now, I know people who've tried SOPs, didn't quite implement, and they go, it doesn't work or it's not for me. Again, execution is everything. And we start with a foundation, we test and measure, we create experiments, and then we've built our confidence. So the insight here is you need to embrace a chief of staff mindset. Realize that your custom GPTs, your workflows, and your team are now valuable business assets that must be treated like critical infrastructure. So you're going to have formal quality assurance and ongoing performance monitoring. And just for the record, the time you're saving using custom GPTs should more than justify the time you spend fixing them, optimizing them, monitoring them. Now, for the record, you would not hire an employee and just turn them loose and say, have a good career. I hope you keep doing good work. We'll see you in 20 years. No, you're going to give them feedback, give them guidance. Same with buying any tools or assets in your business. You wouldn't just run them until they break. You're going to maintain and optimize them. So I want you to understand that SOPs are your most critical, valuable intellectual property in your business. So for clarity, we teach you how to do a process handoff audit. And basically, this is a mixture of experts, but we're looking at what can go wrong if we scale too fast. What are the 3 biggest risks? And then we look at how do we mitigate that? So what would happen if we have poor input data from a new user? What if the underlying ChatGPT model has a version drift? What if our knowledge file is either corrupted or incomplete or inaccurate? We're looking at what could go wrong. And Tim Ferriss has this wonderful tool. I think he calls it fear setting. And basically, we look at what can go wrong and what should we do to make sure it doesn't. So rather than being frozen in inaction, and I see this all the time, people say, well, this could go wrong, so I'm not going to do it. Well, my approach is, if it did go wrong, here's how it might go wrong. How do we mitigate those risks? And then the final growth piece of the mindset badge is an integration mandate. So basically, once you have successfully trained one other person, whether it's a colleague, assistant, or even if it has to be a family member, to use the custom GPT you've built for its primary task. And basically, what you're doing to build your confidence is to demonstrate that the workflow is repeatable and not reliant on your personal intuition. Now, I do certain things that only I can do, and I know that because I've tried to teach other people. But what I do is I take as much out of that as possible that others can learn so that people can assist me, and then I'm just doing the 20% that only I can do. The skill set badge, this is where we get into tools and technique. So the core focus here is on measuring, auditing, and improving your system performance. So for the insight, you need to understand that metrics drive quality. And by the way, this doesn't have to be fancy or complicated. Metrics are just the key performance indicators that matter. And again, having the right metrics and the right amount of metrics is critical. So I'll give you a couple of extreme examples. One, I know a lot of people don't have any metrics. They don't know what success looks like, so they just grind away until they're exhausted, and they never actually know if they've finished something. They don't have the "I crossed the finish line, yay me, let's celebrate." Now, on the other extreme, I've had people who had multiple metrics, too many, in fact. Um, there is a number, and it varies by organization and by size. I personally believe every person on the team, every system, every custom GPT should have at most 3 to 5 metrics that they conform to. I once worked with an organization where individual team members each had over 30 metrics that they had to monitor. And believe it or not, they had a spreadsheet to track their performance. You should not have to wait for your spreadsheet to recalculate to know if you had a good quarter or a bad one. So, for example, in the sales world, um, things like pipeline health are usually tracked, as well as obviously conversations held and how many of those conversations convert to sales. So, we want to reward the behavior that we want repeated. So, if we want a salesperson to initiate new conversations and then close deals, we need to reward both behaviors, initiating conversations and closing deals. A lot of people will oversimplify and say, well, we're just going to track closed deals. But that becomes a lagging indicator. We find out after the fact, we get to the end of the quarter and oops, I didn't make my quota. The funny thing is, I happen to know from experience, my activity today might generate business in 90 days. So if I don't do the thing today, I'm not going to feel any immediate pain. I might put it off, put it off, put it off. If I do that enough times, in 90 days, I'm going to have a drought and I'm going to say, woe is me, the system failed. Our leads are poor, or our marketing didn't work. Reality is there is a predictable time between activity and the reward from it, and customizing that, knowing that for your employees and rewarding the behavior you want repeated helps move them forward quickly. So what we're looking for with our SOPs is that we're moving from it works, which is kind of almost 50-50 chance, to it works reliably 95% of the time. And so what we do here in the brown belt is we are diving deeper into the scientific method and designing experiments that help us objectively measure success. And we can get into the A/B testing principles, but really, truly, we're going to change with A/B testing. All that means is you have your control result, which is your current SOP, and then you're going to pick one variable and change it and try to optimize it. And then you're comparing the results from your original control against the B version or the B test. And some of the best practices I've seen and the best businesses I've explored, they always have this A/B testing. And so, and again, with custom GPTs, you should be saving enough time to justify this. But what happens is you do A/B testing and you measure the objective results. And based on the conclusion of the experiment, the results, you pick a winner, and that going forward becomes your new control. And then you design a new test to compare against that control. So that's one of the fun things. We want to make sure we are really optimizing. Now, once we get to the clarity, we are starting to diagnose prompts. And as I said, we're going to select most critical prompts. We're looking at our system, our inputs, our process steps, our quality control, our feedback loop, and our desired outputs, our desired deliverable. And we're looking at things that we could optimize. So as an example, and this is just an oversimplified one, if you're running a prompt and you tweak the description of the role and you change it slightly, maybe you start with LinkedIn expert to LinkedIn article writing expert, little changes to see if we can produce a measurable change in our output. And again, we will, as one of our steps as we design our SOPs, we're going to have the measurable KPIs or metrics that we're measuring against so we know we can improve. Now, this is probably stating the obvious, but I want to pull it out here for everybody. If we're not measuring the right things, we're going to get bad results from our testing. And quite frankly, that makes us ineffective and inefficient. So I would personally rather see you have 3 laser focused, dialed in metrics than 30 that are kind of vague and fuzzy. So with metrics, quality is more important than quantity. And part of your scientific method is you're going to test the metrics to see if they really, really impact your business or not. If you're driving the wrong results, you've got the wrong metrics, or you're testing against the wrong bar of this is what good looks like. So in the brown belt, we do a lot of optimization, and I am a huge fan of A/B testing. And between you and me, it might sound like work, but if you have your custom GPTs built, if you have your existing SOPs and your user training guides done, we're just running little experiments and we're picking one thing and we're improving it. Now, we use a bunch of frameworks. For me personally, I want to know I'm solving the root cause of a problem. So we use the Toyota 5 Whys, and we're going to drill in down, down, down until we know we're solving the root cause of a problem, not treating symptoms. So that's where we go. We're building into the root cause. Now, the next thing I look at is once we've got the root cause from Toyota 5 Whys, I use something that Michael Gerber and the eMyth crew created called the key frustration process. And basically what we're doing is we're going through analyzing friction points. We're analyzing friction points and we're identifying where they're breaking. So that's what we want to do is test, test, test. So we're looking for change. And through this optimization cycle, we're looking at the Pareto principle. We're looking for 2 things. Number one, we're looking for the 20% optimization that gives us 80% of the benefit. And we're looking for the 20% of the friction that causes 80% of our problems. So we're going to teach you in the dojo how to run a formal A/B test on your prompt diagnostic. We have a hypothesis. We're going to measure the quality and speed differences. We've identified the metrics, and we're going to be clear on what we're changing. Key thing here, one variable at a time. And again, we're not looking for massive gains every day. What we're doing is using Pareto to look for leverage gains. And over time, we're going to successfully implement the superior optimized version into your custom GPT. So I've mentioned another book, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And basically what we're doing is looking at and asking ourselves, how could we make this 1% better than it was yesterday? And if we do that consistently, maybe it's 1% faster, 1% better, 1% something, we're showing constant and never-ending improvement. Now, the third area here is the gear set badge. And this is where we get into those systems and flow. So the core focus is building feedback loops for continuous improvement. So at this point, excuse me, at this point, you might wonder, what are we improving? Why do we improve? Typically, what I would do is for every SOP that we have, I would start with the metrics. And let's say we have 3 metrics. I would do a test, an A/B test against metric 1 versus metric 2, metric 1 versus metric 3, metric 3 versus metric 2. And I would identify which metric has the most opportunity in it, as well as the most friction and drag. So where are we struggling the most, and where could we leap forward the most? So a good feedback loop, you're getting feedback both from your clients and your employees, and you should be getting it from your custom GPT helping you leverage the system. So the insight here is that model drift is inevitable. Its impact on you is what you can control. And I will say that if you look at the general model, ChatGPT by itself, model drift is inevitable. Historically, they seem to make big leaps forward every roughly 3 to 6 months. There's something that changes. If you're setting up your custom GPTs and you're setting them up right, your models should mostly be current. You might need to tweak rather than major overhaul. Now, I have heard some people say when ChatGPT upgraded to version 5.0, version 5 from version 4.0, there was a big breakage. A lot of people, their systems went down. I don't like that, so I'm always testing. And the better your custom GPTs are set up, the less impact you'll have from the overall model shift. But that's why we build, in mine, everyone we build, we have the metrics, the quality control, and the feedback loop so that we can, in fact, identify those changes. So we will have some self-correction. And really, truly, what we're looking at is if we have a set of metrics and we track them religiously, we should see almost within a day or so if our performance is dropping. So basically, our goal is we're always looking at the performance and we're always looking to optimize. If performance dips, then we want to know why and how do we fix it. So for clarity, we have the feedback loop, and this is where we integrate simple user feedback into our workflow. So this might be a field in a tracking sheet where the user is giving an objective or a subjective answer. Was the output useful? Did it meet our criteria? What did we like? What didn't we like? Or maybe the user is rating the output quality on a scale of 1 to 10. But the key is with any feedback loop, we need to understand, what did the user like? What didn't they like? What should we do more of? What should we do less of? What should we stop doing? So the better the feedback, and I prefer numbers that we can analyze. So if we can quantify that, that's great. If not, then if we can be subjective and we can sort of understand qualitatively, either way we can improve. I personally like to see numbers. That way we can say, okay, our goal for this year is to improve that by 10%. But again, maybe it's more subjective and we build out the quantitative over time. So in the growth stage here, we have what we call an audit and document process. And here we're using, as I said, things like the Toyota 5 Whys, the E-Myth key frustration process. I even use something called Obvious Atoms and the test of simplicity, I think it's called. But basically, we want to test. And this is where the scientific method becomes almost a habit for you. And so we're measuring and we're asking for feedback. And so we will have the quality assurance loop, we have our feedback loop. This is all about optimizing what we do. So by the brown belt level, we expect that you already know what you know. We expect that you know how to do your job. Now we're just looking at ways to make it better. So it's like mastering a skill and then saying, okay, if I do minor little tweaks, I can go from a B player to an A player. We want to look at that constant, never ending improvement. And here we're going to update configurations, instructions, the knowledge files for our custom GPT, and we're going to also make sure we update the user guide and the standard operating procedure so that we are always training our new people on the best practices. Now, for the record, when I say constant and never-ending improvement, I mean that as an organizational whole. We're not going to take one little role and every day tear it apart and start to build it again. What we're going to do is fix the pieces, the individual tasks, collectively, so that over time we're removing more and more of that friction. Now, the community badge, as always, this is about collaboration. So our core focus here is on sharing repeatable, resilient SOPs for wider adoption. So by repeatable, what I mean is that new people, additions to the team, anybody on the team can pick up one of your custom GPTs, follow the SOPs, and get consistently high quality results according to internal standards. And by the way, if there's a problem in there, if we're not seeing consistency, sometimes the first place to look is the user guide. Sometimes we have to look at the actual SOP, and sometimes we have to look at the prompts and the structure of the knowledge files that built the custom GPT. So there is an element of experimentation. And again, we're always looking for areas where we know we can have the best impact. And when I say resilient, what I mean is that even if things change, our SOPs are constant. They're always ensuring we meet the standards we've set for ourselves and our team. And so, as an insight, shared documentation is shared resilience. The way I set things up, I am a Google user. I only use the Google ecosystem. We have a Google Drive, and what we have is an individual folder for each system in our organization. Now, I break it down a little further. I have systems broken down between attract, convert, and deliver. Attract is how we get new leads, convert is how we turn those leads into clients, and deliver is how we deliver our service. So within attract, convert, deliver, I have individual systems for areas of the business. So maybe depending on you and your complexity, I might have marketing, sales, operations, etc. And then for each system, I have the individual processes that aggregate and accomplish the goal of the system. So it's from very high level down to very specific task. And what I have at my main, in the old days, we called it the root folder. That's what I would still call it today. I don't know what others do. But in our main folder, I'll have one spreadsheet that tracks everything. And I'll explain that in a second. And then I'll have a Google Doc that has a bit of a narrative. And then in the individual systems, I have subfolders for the individual processes. In that folder, I will have a Google Doc that lists out all of the steps and what they mean and why they do what they do, what order. I will have the user guide, the SOP, and then I'll have a checklist or template in a spreadsheet that somebody could follow and literally check off each thing as they do it. Now, at the top level of my folder, I have a master tracker. And basically, what that has is columns. So there'll be a column. Um, you select whether it's a track, convert, deliver. And then you'll select a next column where it's the system that you're covering. And then the next column is the task. And then I will track a link to the custom GPT we use to follow that system. I'll have a link to the subfolder where that system is set up. And I will go as far as to have a column where we track most recent update. So we can always look at it at a glance and say when it has been updated. And then I'll usually have a column for next update. So everything I believe should be reviewed at minimum annually. Some things need to be done quarterly, some need to be done monthly. And then I'll have a responsible person, and that's the person on my team who's in charge of that SOP. And then I also have, believe it or not, I have a system for SOPs. And in that system, I have a process for creating SOPs. I have a process for testing them. I have a process for updating them. And I have a process to train people on the changes. So record as much as you want. This does sound needlessly complicated, but the reality is these are your assets and you need to track them that way. So we give our people, for clarity, we like to create an SOP scorecard. And here we're going to update the documentation to create a 5-point grading scorecard for the quality of your custom GPT's outputs. We've talked about this before. I'm going to have 5 points that are different from yours. You're going to have ones that are unique to you. But basically, these are the human in the loop. We are looking at this saying, I need to review this. And if one of those 5 things drops below our standard, that means we probably need to escalate repairing. So as we do our little updates, as we change things, we're always the last say comes from the person in charge of the system, the one who's the champion. We need to make sure that this is following our criteria. And I think I mentioned in our purple belt, my number one criteria for success is the question, does this add value to my avatar? So I know who I serve. I'm very clear on what they need, what I want them to do. So everything is based on that. That is my live or die metric. If it does not provide value to my avatar, it doesn't get shipped. It doesn't see the light of day. We go back and we fix it. So here, you're going to look at things like your brand voice. You're going to look at factual accuracy. Is it logical? Is it consistent? Does it make sense? So this is literally, think about this. You are the adult in the conversation, and this is the last line of defense against making a massive mistake, or quite frankly, even a smaller mistake. Your team is still the expert doing the job. ChatGPT and your custom GPTs are just the tool that they use. So we do not want to replace professional judgment. We don't want to replace gut instinct, but we want to make sure that there is a measurable way of saying this passes our final quality control and it can go out the door. Now, for the record, it depends on how critical the activity is, how detailed your scorecard is going to be. If you're just posting a blog every day and maybe it's for internal team use only and only your team sees it, anything you mistake there can be fixed. Whereas if you're putting things out and spending money on ads, you want to have a higher degree of certainty as to the quality of the output. Now, in our growth, we start to share SOPs. And this is where it gets really magical. For the record, we start by sharing within our digital dojo. So you're going to share with other brown belts, maybe higher, and sometimes possibly even our lower level belts. But basically, you're going to share the SOP and your 5-point scorecard with the community. And what we're doing here, and this benefits everybody, this is not something you're giving up. I mentioned it is your intellectual property. What we're going to do is iron sharpens iron. So we're going to put these SOPs out into our community, and other people are going to run them and test them. And basically, they're going to give you their sense of what the metrics were and grade you against it. So what we're doing is we're optimizing your SOPs, and really as a community, we're building templates to help other people implement SOPs in their business. Now, this is not a one-way street. You're going to share with our community is going to share with you. And that's what we encourage is everybody, it's kind of like a potluck. Everybody's bringing something to the table. Everybody leaves with something. And again, what this does, and I am all about leverage and acceleration, if we all bring SOPs to the table and we're all focusing on attract, convert, and deliver, over time, we build a massive library of best practices. And by the way, if we have, I don't believe in the word competitor, but let's pretend you had a competitor in the group who's in your same industry. What I would suggest is it's not you versus them, and then the rest of the industry doesn't matter. What I'm going to say is you and your quote unquote competitor could sharpen each other's blades, and you two could dominate the industry as the shining lights. That might be a little optimistic for some people, but really that's the way I view the world. But the idea is how can we help each other grow? And by the way, if we're all experimenting and we're looking to optimize how we attract, convert, and deliver, we're all going to grow faster because we don't have to each repeat the same experiments. We can review other people's scientific experimentation, their documentation, their user guides, their custom GPT setup, their SOPs, and we can all grow faster together. And this becomes really about acceleration, because if more people are helping us and holding us accountable to being effective and efficient, we're going to become more effective and more efficient. Now, the final badge is the attitude badge. And by now, I would hope that you have understood this. This is about equal parts respect for yourself, respect for the dojo, respect for our community, respect for the tools, and that includes your custom GPT and your SOPs and your user guides. And now we're really getting into the consistency of it all. By the time we get to brown belt, most of this should be building a custom GPT, eliminate, automate, delegate to save time. This should all be almost second nature to you by now. But now we're going to make it more and more consistent. And I promise you, I see this over and over. At the lower belts, we end up asking and solving a lot of tactical things, which really, really aren't going to move the needle of success that far. But basically, by now, we should have freed up some capacity. And we're now, instead of asking, how do I do X, we're looking at the strategic, should I do X? What else can I do besides X to fix my business? So we're looking to the future rather than looking to today and yesterday. So tactical to me is usually, what do I need to do today to get something done? Whereas strategic, and by the way, tactical, I would stretch, we can get out to what do we need to do for the next 90 days. Whereas strategic, we're starting to look at the 90-day, looking at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year. The further forward we can look, then we can build today's tactics to help us accomplish tomorrow's strategy. So one of my favorite quotes attributed to Sun Tzu is strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So we are going to focus on strategy. So insight, the purpose of efficiency is capacity. Now, before efficiency, we have effectiveness. Effectiveness is doing the right things. That's the strategic view. Efficiency is doing things right. That's the tactical view. So we want to add capacity, and it's not just about faster work. It's about freeing up our time and mental energy to look ahead to the strategic, non-automatable work. So there are some things we cannot eliminate, automate, or delegate, only we can do. And sadly, those are the long-term in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He refers to them, Stephen Covey, he refers to them as the not urgent, important. And basically what we're doing there is we put off the strategic work because it's not urgent. There's no deadlines on corporate planning unless you're in a big organization. But in smaller businesses, the urgency of the deadline, usually it's we got to get this done today, outweighs where do we want to take the business in 3 years. So we're freeing up time so that you can focus your mental energy on that strategic long-term work. So for clarity, we make a strategic commitment. And here I say we define one new strategic task. In our program, we typically do 3. We do 1 for attract, convert, or deliver, I should say. But maybe one of those strategic tasks is competitor analysis, long-term business planning, new product creation. I am a huge fan. I personally believe that the least risky, highest reward in a business is creating new products and services for existing clients. The reason I say that is we don't need to do market research. We don't need to go outside for market research. We can reach out to our favorite clients, ask them what else we need to do or how we could help them. What other problems can we solve for them? The risk is low because if they say, I'd like you to solve this, then it's really a discussion of, okay, what's that worth to you? And we should know that because we know our customers. But the next best is we're looking for identifying and adding new customers. That takes time and there's an element of risk because we need to hope we can clone our current best customers. So now we're going to dedicate reclaimed hours to committing our time savings to growth. So the way I usually balance this, and we talk about this in other belt levels, I have a heaven or hell exercise. And the goal is we eliminate, automate, or delegate 10 hours of hell. And these are the draining, low-value tasks that just take time and they're repetitive. And what I usually do is I suggest, and we have a specific tool we use to do this, we replace the 10 hours we took away with 6 highly leveraged strategic hours. And it is very clear what we do in that quote unquote strategic time because it has to in fact be strategic. So my idea is we take away 10 hours of stuff that drains us. We add 6 hours a week that helps us grow. And then we can take the other 4 hours and we can reinvest in anything we want, whether that's hobbies, time with friends, family, personal development, what have you. And so with growth, we want to sustain that capacity. And so we're going to encourage you to practice your weekly maintenance ritual from the purple belt, and you're going to spend at least 2 hours per week on a new strategic task that we've chosen. Like I said, we do 3, not 1. And you're going to do that for at least a month. In a better world, what I look for is over the next 90 days, we're going to work on this strategic attract, this strategic convert, and this strategic deliver initiative. And basically what we want to do is we're looking to see that ChatGPT has taken you out of the role of doer and into the role of leader. And to be clear, you're leading both your team, you're leading your clients, you're leading yourself, and you're leading the technology, you're leading your custom GPTs. So that's the attitude badge. Now, if you are watching this on one of the platforms where it's free and available to all, congratulations. I hope you got some value out of this. If you actually want to come and implement this sort of thing, this is what we do in our Pharos Business Digital Dojo. You can visit us at pharosbusiness.com/digital-dojo. Thank you.